Hi, today we're going to do lesson 8.1. We're going to talk about circles. So you're going to want to open up to your notes section and go ahead and make a nice big circle. And we're going to talk about the different parts of the circle. You had a little introduction to circle parts when we read the story about circumference. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the pieces. So right in the middle of the circle, some people would call that the middle. The true name for it is center. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move that right to the center to label it. So center right there in the middle. Oftentimes you will see a letter there identifying it. So maybe they put the letter A there and say this is circle A, but that is the center. Next up in the story, we talked about Lady Di, who came from the town of Ameter. And the diameter is when you go clear across the circle. So maybe from this point all the way down to this point, and you have to go through the center. So this right here is a diameter. I'm going to label that as a diameter. I also see a diameter right here. If we were to go from this point all the way across to the other side, that would also be a diameter as well. A radius, though, is diameter's son, Lady Di's son, and he only goes halfway across the circle. So if you were to go from here on the circle to the center, this small part right here, this is your radius. In the book, we also heard about circumference. Circumference in the story left the bark on the outside of the circle. So I try to draw a picture of going around the outside. It's like a little squiggle around the outside. Forgive my poor penmanship. But going around the outside, that is our circumference. There were two things that were not in the story, and those are arcs and chords. A chord is when you take any two pieces that are pieces of the circle. So it could be right here and right here. These are 2 points on the circle, and you connect them. So this is a chord. I will tell you that a diameter can also be considered a chord, because a diameter, here's a point, and down here is a point, and that's connecting 2 points that are on a circle as well. So that could also be labeled as a chord. So diameter can be labeled also as a chord. Not all chords, however, are diameters, because obviously this one here does not go through the center. And then here, this portion that I have on the circle that's highlighted, it's just a chunk out of the circle. This is what we call an arc. Okay, so if you need to catch up, go ahead and pause the video, but these are all the different circle parts that we'll want to understand and know as we move forward. Now, part of lesson 8.1 is being able to find the circumference, an actual measurement for this distance around the circle. So there are two formulas we can use for that. So we're going to carry on. When we find the circumference, the distance around the outside, the two formulas we use are C, which stands for circumference, equals 2 times pi, and we will be using 3.14 for our value for pi. Please don't use the pi button on your calculator. That goes much further, as we know from our pi competition before we left school. There's a lot of digits of pi, so we truncate it or stop it at 3.14 for our calculations. So we have 2 times pi times the radius. Now radius, remember, the little guy in the story, just halfway across the circle. Or since you're doing two radiuses, if you were to put two radiuses across, that would be the same as a diameter. So the alternative formula you can use is circumference equals pi times diameter. And remember, pi will use 3.14. So we're going to do two samples. We're going to go ahead and we're going to make this first circle here. And if you look at this first circle, you have to first identify what was given to you in the circle. And if you look, we went from the center out to the circle. So you have to ask yourself, is that the radius or is that the diameter? And we would say, oh, that's the little guy. That's radius. So we're going to select this formula to use. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to do 3 lines of work. I know you guys love me for this, but 3 lines of work. So we start with our formula. So 2 times pi times r, there's my formula. The second line of work, you're going to substitute in all the numbers that we're going to be calculating. So for us, when we calculate, we don't know the circumference yet, but we're going to be doing 2 times 3.14 times 5. At this point, you would grab your calculator. And when you grab your calculator, you just type it in and you would get an answer of circumference is 31.4. And the label is just inches because if we could actually use a tape measure, a flexible one, and measure around that circle. Okay. Our second example here, we have a circle. And first we look at what we've been given. If you notice, we have Lady Di of Ameter reaching all the way across the circle. So we could use this formula, the first one, but if we did that, we would have to cut the 28 in half. So as an alternative, I'm just going to use this second formula, circumference equals pi times diameter. So my first line of work, write the formula. Circumference, oh, and I realized my formula is not correct there. It should be pi. And let me just steal a pi from over here. It should be pi times diameter. And then if we do this, we should have our number 3.14 times, and I'm going to change my values here. .14 times 28, and when we multiply that together, we should get 87.92 millimeters. So we've got pi times the diameter, and that's your answer. So two formulas to pick from, depending on if you have radius given to you or diameter. And if you ever need a radius and you're given a diameter, cut it in half. We're going to practice this today. So what we'll do for our assignment, I have a matching activity for you in Google Slides. You are going to have to do some work, write out some things, but then you'll match the correct answer to each of the problems in Google Slides, and you'll just pull it over and put it with the correct problem.